We found that during organizational restructuring events, for instance, merger and acquisition, men and women tend to react differently. And we found that gender homophily is intensified. Men are making more friends, new friends with men. They focus on network formation. They try to expand their networks by making more new connections with other men. And
Right.
women tend to focus on their existing networks with other women. So their networks are more dense but stronger.
Welcome to The Ripple Effect, the podcast that takes you on a journey through the minds of Wharton faculty. I'm your host, Dan Loney, and in each episode, we'll be diving deep into the inspiration behind the groundbreaking research that Wharton professors have conducted and exploring how their findings resonate with the world today. The impact of one business combining with another can play a significant role in how social networks in the workplace develop and at times can potentially come apart. Research from our guest today and her colleagues look at that fact specifically. Tiantian Yang is an assistant professor of management and of sociology here at the Wharton School. Tiantian, great to talk to you again. How are you?
Hi, Dan. Great to see you here. Very excited to talk about my work.
Yes, absolutely. I guess let's start with the concept of networks. And what was it that drove you to want to look at how networks in the workplace get impacted, especially when there's some sort of, strong event like a merger or an acquisition that occurs?
Yeah, the idea of networks, how important it is. Like everyone can even feel that in their daily lives. We all have all kinds of social relationships. When people look for jobs, they ask their friends, their family members. And in organizations, these kind of networks are really important because networks actually serve as a conduit for information and resources. And such networks are not only shaped by the formal structures, for example, the kind of jobs people have. Usually, if they are working in higher level, more powerful positions, they tend to be the center of larger networks. However, there are also like interpersonal relationships that shape these networks. So it's a very complex dynamic, and different people tend to engage networks differently, which actually have consequences for a lot of important things.
And so for this research specifically, you were looking in and around the medical community as to how some of these impacts occur?
Yes, and I kind of stumbled on the healthcare industry, but after I studied the industry, I realized networks are so important. For example, when people look for doctors, and doctors sometimes need to refer them to other doctors. For instance, generalists need to refer their doctor to specialists, and these kind of referral networks are not only shaped by insurance networks, but also shaped by doctors' networks. And these networks are very important because they really affect like how many patients doctors will have, and also the kind of effective care that will be delivered to patients. So they have consequences for both physicians and the patients.
But you note that there is a difference between men's networks and women's networks, especially when there is this kind of disruption.
Yes, so the disruption you are referring to is merger and acquisition that we studied, but I think there are other kinds of restructuring events in organizations. So going back to the question about gender difference in networks, and it's very interesting that when people think about gender and networks, they tend to think about network formation, right? For example, some people have better networks, larger, expensive, more useful networks because they're good at the networking, meaning that they reach out to people more, they build larger networks, they're good at making friends. But network formation is only one kind of network dynamics. The other kind is network maintenance. So people do after they establish networks, make friends, build new networks, they have to have ways to maintain networks. And if they are not good at maintaining networks, they may experience network decay, which is that networks will become weaker and eventually disappear. So when people talk about gender differences in networks and also the gender gap in resources acquired from networks, they tend to attribute this to men's better ability to build networks with other men. So it's gender homophily because men's networks tend to be larger, stronger, and also because men tend to occupy higher positions in organizations, more powerful positions. So gender homophily allow men to build a better networks. So that's the kind of conventional notion people have about gender homophily and social networks. So what we're saying is, look at look at network maintenance. Like men and women may do differently too. So there we found something really interesting. We found that during organizational restructuring events, for instance, merger and acquisition, men and women tend to react differently. And we found that gender homophily is intensified. Men are making more friends, new friends with men. They focus on network formation. They try to expand their networks by making more new connections with other men. And
Right.
women tend to focus on their existing networks with other women. So their networks are more dense but stronger. And this has consequences for net resources they acquire from these networks during merger and acquisition because during these turbulent times, each woman actually provided more resources, referred more patients to each other. So
Hmm.
women's networks actually provided a greater advantage to them during turbulent times. So that's the big finding we have from this research.
Part of the story is obviously the importance of women's networks sticking together.
Yes.
Do women's networks tend to be stronger than men's networks in general?
So we don't find a general pattern that women tend to be better at maintaining networks. However, there are particular circumstances under which women are become better at maintaining networks. For instance, during COVID, there has research showing that women tend to maintain networks better without face-to-face interaction. For some reason, men's networks, for them to maintain relationships, they have to do certain activities together. They have to see each other. So women are better at kind of recalling information, maintaining networks without a in-person, face-to-face interaction. But what we found in this context, I think it's kind of also explained by the kind of social psychological mechanisms because women feel like they need to support each other during difficult times. That's why they are lean toward each other rather than looking
Right.
for new connections.
And so that brings up the component of trust when you're talking
Yes,
about continuing and strengthening these networks as well, correct?
right. Yes. So there is some endogeneity because if you think about existing networks and new networks, existing networks presumably are stronger, right? So this networks maybe during difficult times or turbulent times, and there is a lot of uncertainty in who will be helping me. So women tend to lean on the relationships they already had. And there is also like a greater level of trust in those relationships. And if you think about people helping each other, when there is reciprocity, people support each other when it's
Right.
mutual, and it also reinforces the trust, level of trust in the relationships.
I found it interesting in looking at the research that it seems like the belief is that women's networks tend to be more inward focused,
Yeah,
whereas men's networks tend to be more outward focused. And in many cases, the outward focus even goes beyond the walls of the company to
yeah.
other networks and other firms as well, correct?
Yeah, so I think that might be an outcome or general pattern people observe, but I wouldn't attribute that, like what social media and conventional wisdom say, to individual's personality. So it's not just because women are more introverted, men are more extroverted. They are shaped by social structures and cultural norms, right? Like
Yeah.
there are differential like gendered expectations for how men and women should act in terms of building and for maintaining relationships. Think about it, women are prescribed to be more communal. That means they need to take care of their friends, support each other, whereas men are more agentic and more assertive. So they're going out to making new connections with other people. And there are also impact of structural, the positions, impact of their current jobs, right? If they're at a higher level positions, more powerful positions, that will help them to make more new connections. So I think the general pattern you described is right, but the kind of reasons, the structural cultural reasons that shape those patterns, I think are beyond the individual personality.
Let me finish up with kind of a two-parted question. And first, in doing this research, what do you think you have learned and maybe is going to be passed on to others about just the value of women's networks in the workplace and how they can have such a significant impact on the company that they're working for in general?
Yeah, I think that's a question that my co-author Marisa King from Wharton and Ifta, who is a postdoc at INSEAD, all of us have thought a lot about, right? We want to really think hard about the implication of our research for women, men and women, for individuals and for organizations. So our research focused on the short-term changes
Right.
following restructuring events. So we don't know the long-term impact yet. I think when merger and acquisition happen in organizations, actually, I think we think of this beyond not just hospital organizations in general. So organizations want people to build new connections, right?
Right.
Because then the units, the different the existing organization, new organizations can be integrated better. I think that in that process, what we observe is that because it creates some kind of uncertainty in relationships, women are actually leaning back, right? So it's not necessarily helpful for the organization in long term. However, in short term, like women are able to kind of sustain their relationships and maintain the resources they acquired from networks. So that would be one thing I would say is a double-edged sword. So it's not universally good. The other thing is, when people think about gender differences in networks or impact of homophily, they tend to claim generally that networks networks leading to disadvantages for women. Right.
Right.
So that's a general notion or conventional wisdom people have. But I think I want people to think differently based on our research, which is there are circumstances women can benefit from networks. And even the networks they have with other women, it's not like women shouldn't be making friends with each other. They shouldn't
Right.
spend time maintaining, building relationships. Actually, the networks can become an advantage for them during turbulent times. So the question is more about how do you build a more balanced relationship, which can provide a lot of resources in stable environments, and also the kind of network relationships that can help you weather through difficult or uncertain conditions.
Well, and I guess to a degree, part of that also is not only having that network expand and grow, and it might even be outside of the borders of the company that you work for to help that firm, but also to
Yes.
potentially help that person's longer term goals of where they want to take their career.
Exactly. And here we have only looked at patients' referral. So it's a kind of career relevant outcome. But in real life, there's so many other outcomes that can be shaped by networks, like our well-being, the
Yeah.
activities we do in our private life, and our work outcomes, the other, like even more general career outcomes, career mobility, moving to other firms and moving up in organizations. So I think um, there are actions that individuals can take that to help themselves.
Tiantian, great to talk to you again. Great research. Thank you very much for sharing it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to talk with you, Dan. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All the best. Tiantian Yang, who is an assistant professor of management and of sociology here at the Wharton School. Thank you for listening to The Ripple Effect. We hope you found this episode informative and engaging. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review so that we can continue to bring you the best insight from the Wharton School.